The other day, one of my friends, he was texting me, he asked me how big my arm was, right? So I don't normally measure, like I don't do like tape measure measurements very regularly, but I did just so that he could have the satisfaction of knowing how small my arm was. And it turned out my arm was like between like 14 3/4 and 15 inches. And that is not big by any means, right? But like, especially on a bodybuilding stage, my arms kind of suck. But in comparison to this guy that was asking me, my arms are quite a bit better than his. So he was kind of trying to figure out, like, if our arms are around the same size, like, why do mine look like this and his look like the way his look? And I mean, what it comes down to is obviously how much muscle you have versus how much fat you have, right? But that's completely unrelated. This video was going to be about sort of like beginner basics. So if you are just starting out in training with weights or dieting, or just trying to figure out how to improve your physique, I mean, even if you're an experienced lifter, if you don't know these things, then it's probably valuable information for you to learn as soon as possible. But I guess there's 3 principles I want to talk about. Well, kind of, I guess 2. One of them is calories in versus calories out, and the other is progressive overload. And then kind of within calories in versus calories out, macronutrient distribution. But yeah, let's get started with calories in versus calories out. So the idea is that in order to manipulate your weight, like get heavier or get lighter, gain or lose weight, the idea is that everybody has a certain number of calories that they need to eat in order to maintain their weight. So let's say for a certain individual, he is eating 2,000 calories and he's consistently maintaining weight every single day eating 2,000 calories. That will be his maintenance calories, his baseline. And the idea of calories in versus calories out, which, by the way, that's not really an idea that you can argue, that's just the way things work. But yeah, anyways, if you're eating 2,000 calories and maintaining weight, let's say you were to increase calories to 2,200. You'd be in a 200 calorie surplus every day, right? And then you would gain a little bit of weight. So whenever you're in a surplus, you're gaining weight. And then whenever you're in a deficit, you're losing weight. So if you're in a deficit, let's say he was eating 1,800 calories a day instead of 2,000. Now he's in a 200 calorie deficit every day. So he's going to be losing weight. And the general idea, or what most people commonly believe, is that 3,500 calories is equal to a pound of mass. Which is not to say that you should be in a 3,500 calorie surplus or deficit in a day or anything like that, but let's say that you are cutting and your goal is to lose 1 pound per week, then that would mean a 3,500 calorie surplus over that entire week. So if you split that up evenly, then that means it's a 500 calories, or sorry, I meant deficit. That would mean you're in a 500 calorie deficit every single day of that week, and then at the end of the week, or by the end of the week, you should have an average weigh-in of around a pound less than where you started at the beginning of the week. So yeah, calories in versus calories out. Manipulating body weight is entirely dependent on the amount of calories that you're eating in relation to the amount of calories your body requires to maintain. And then when it comes down to how much of that weight that you're gaining or losing is muscle and how much of it is fat, that's where the macronutrient distribution starts to matter, as well as the quality of your training. The only thing is that I know a lot of beginners, especially if you didn't know the calories in versus calories out thing, it's sort of overwhelming to start trying to track your macros as well. But so in the very, very beginning, I would recommend figure out where your maintenance calories is and go from there with a caloric surplus or deficit, depending on what you're trying to do with your physique. And then somewhere down the line, when you decide that, if you decide to take it really seriously with transforming your physique, then yes, tracking macros will be absolutely essential. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, tracking macros, you can go ahead and Google flexible dieting or Google if it fits your macros. Or you can even check out some of the other videos on my channel. I think I have like 2 videos on if it fits your macros now. And just the idea is that you have a certain number of grams of protein, carbs, and fat for every day. You hit those numbers. Real simple. And within those numbers, if you hit your numbers, then you're also hitting your calorie requirement, because the only 3 macronutrients are protein, carbs, and fat. That's the basic idea, but like I said, go check out my other videos. And then the second principle I wanted to talk about was progressive overload. So progressive overload is sort of a training principle that the idea behind it is that in order to increase muscular size or muscle strength, you need to progressively overload your muscles. So the idea is that you either need to increase weight, increase reps, increase sets, or increase frequency. And when it comes to increasing frequency, there's kind of a point of diminishing returns. Like you can't, let's say you normally hit legs once a week. You could increase the frequency so you're hitting legs twice a week. But once you get around to the time where you're hitting legs like 3, 4, 5 times a week, it becomes sort of impractical because you don't have enough time to recover. So frequency, yes, it will make a difference, but there's only so far you can go with frequency. But when it comes down to increasing weight and increasing volume, what that means is, just as a general example, let's say that somebody is, when they squat on their leg days, they're doing squats and they do, let's say, 3 sets of 10 with 225 pounds. What that means is that if they hit successfully 3 sets of 10 with 225 pounds, if they can do that successfully this week, that means their next leg workout, they should either increase the weight and do the same number of sets, same number of reps, or they should keep the weight the same and increase the number of reps per set, or they can keep the weight the same, they can keep the number of reps per set the same, and they can just add another set. So either way, you're just making it a little bit harder every time. And progressive overload is really useful for sort of linear progression. So like rather than trying to make leaps and bounds, you're consistently making really, really small baby steps of progress, which in the long run will add up to quite a bit. But yeah, that's about it for progressive overload. The only thing I will say is that there are a lot of bodybuilders out there, and there's a lot of very accomplished bodybuilders out there who don't understand progressive overload. And you'll see a lot of training programs that don't really follow progressive overload, but I think that's another one of those cases of conventional wisdom being spread, not because it's right, but just because it's conventional. So, like I've always said, make sure whatever you're doing is backed up in science and empirical evidence. And like, I know a lot of people say train for the pump or train for, a lot of people think that because they're sore the next day that that's a good thing. And I'm not saying it's bad, but delayed onset muscle soreness and the feeling of the pump, neither of them are very useful in quantifying your progress. Whereas with progressive overload, you can actually have, like, you can log your workouts and have proof that you're progressing with your weights and your volume. So as long as you're making progress in weights, volume, or frequency, then you should be making progress with your physique and or strength. And I think that about wraps it up for this video. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. And if any of you guys ever have questions, I know sometimes it's kind of, I don't know, it might seem kind of weird to post a question on the comments where everybody can see it, especially if you're unsure about the question. You can always feel free to inbox me, and if it's a good enough question, I will try to make a video about it. But yeah, subscribe if you want, share my video if you want, but that's it. So I'll see you guys next time.